Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Manifest. This was a back-to-back episode situation, but I'm going to be doing these episodes one at a time. So at the time of me recording this review of episode 12, I've only seen episode 12. I'm going to do a watch and then separate review for episode 13, so do keep that in mind. I will try and release these around the same time, so that, you know. Nevertheless, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we open up with Michaela's calling, and it's like the plane situation again. You're like, okay, so where's this going? At first, you would have expected it to kind of focus on Cal because he tends to be the focus of all of this, but then in actuality, it turns out it's actually Michaela, which is also the interesting thing of like why specific people get certain callings. I guess it's just like why, I guess it's their time to rise up or whatever, but it's like in this particular calling, like the plane starts bleeding, but none of the other passengers reacting. No Ben, no Sanvi, no Cal, but in that, well, kind of makes sense potentially when it comes to Sanvi, but the thing behind this situation is like, why not get everyone else involved, considering how dangerous it is? But, you know, I guess it's part of the trials and everything, and everyone's kind of got to do their own part and handle things their own way. Regardless, Michaela sees that Bethany is there, but Bethany kind of reacts to her, so like she's part of this calling. And so when she snaps out of it, like, because Zeke had snapped her out of it, like, Michaela, are you okay? Like, and she was terrified because for her, it's like, we got to find something out, because for her, it's like someone's going to get hurt or die because of this. So we also have the complicated Jarrett situation, which is like, Jarrett has always been an ally, but he has proven himself to kind of be a thorn to a certain extent too, especially when it came to this whole Zeke thing, just because the whole complicated thing between him and Michaela. He became a little more antagonistic, but then he kind of, he kind of swerved and was kind of better, because for him it's like he's pissed and upset with Michaela because it's like, no, you can't quit being a cop. Well, I think first and foremost what's upsetting him the most is it's kind of like he's feeling like he's being abandoned by Michaela again. I mean, she never gave him the, she never said yes to his proposal, and then like she disappeared for 5 years. He kind of had to move on, but then like, oh, you come back into my life and my life kind of turns upside down. Like, I still am in love with you, and I give up my relationship to be with you, and we end up not together. So it's a lot of like complicated layers of what Jarrett's feeling. I think he's feeling kind of abandoned yet again. It's just kind of like, and despite everything, those feelings of his are resurfacing, and obviously Zeke was kind of feeling it. I think he was feeling it kind of on both sides. He talks about it later on, like, right, Jarrett, still has feelings for you. I don't need to be an empath to, see and know that. But then, like, I'm sure, I almost halfway expecting him to be like, I know you feel the same way too. I kind of halfway expected that, but that didn't end up being the case. So, I don't know. At the same time, you had Ben and Grace planning out, okay, like how we're going to handle this whole tailfin situation. But then they get, I think, Olive shows up, and obviously for her, it's like, right, I wasn't here when you guys needed me. I mean, the Angelina thing. And, Grace is like, I'm sorry. I didn't listen to your feelings when you were right about her the entire time. And the fact is like, oh, where's Cal? He's up sleeping. It never came up in the episode. I thought it was going to be a whole thing of, Angelina, like, snuck back in and was in the house. I thought that's what was going on. But I was like, oh, I thought they were going to discover it. Turns out, throughout the episode, it's like, nope, she's not there. So, wasn't the whole point of her, didn't he tell her about the key and everything? Because wasn't he going to try, I guess maybe because they were in the house, so she never was able to sneak back in. Maybe not. But obviously Ben gets called by Michaela about, like, right, because she's having this calling, we don't know what it's necessarily about. Which Grace is like, at the very least, this gives us more time to kind of plan things out. But for Ben, it's like, I don't know. At the same time, Vance calls him up about Cal. They immediately rush out. Well, to be fair, Olive puts on the brace anklet because, like, obviously Ben doesn't want Grace going to Eureka on her own, so they go together, and Olive kind of, it's like doing her part, and putting the anklet on and be like, I don't know how long this magic trick is going to last, so you need to kind of do what you need to get Cal and come back. And when they finally get there, they're trying to drag Cal back, but everyone's like, no, like, we're not the reason why he's here. But Cal is like, you guys aren't listening. I had a calling, and they're like, I guess because they already have plans to destroy the tailfin. Like, don't worry, we already know about the tailfin. Like, they can't really explain that in front of everyone else. But then he shows them the burns to the point, like, the burns on his body are like boiling. There's boils on them now. It's like, oh, and it seems like they're continuing to get worse. So obviously they bring Sanvi in because Grace is like, I'm not letting anyone near my child unless it's Sanvi. So she gets brought in to examine And Troy comes in with news that it has the same sapphire compound on it like the tailfin in Ben's hand, but it's like, but he hasn't even touched the tailfin, so why has he got the same sapphire thing? Like, what's going on there? And so eventually they start piecing it together that maybe, like, we kind of ignored certain signs that maybe this is why it's making Cal suffer, because it's like, this is a sign you can't ignore. Like, it's a literal manifestation of like, oh, you won't pay attention? Well, pay attention to this. But it's like, why Cal though? And it's like, well, he has always been the most sensitive when it comes to the callings and stuff like that. So obviously for them, you know, Ben's still dead set on his plan of, I'm going to destroy the tailfin. Somebody kind of tells him how to do it, and even Troy's like, I'll help you, I'll back your play on this. Regardless, he's like, and it's even kind of sweet, he was like, I'll do anything for Zombie. I'm like, oh, I mean, to be fair, he kind of has a crush on Zombie too, so it's like, that comes as no surprise, but it's like, you know, because I think also in his mind, it's like, if Zombie believes it's the right thing, then it's the right thing to do. Like, Zombie's always tried to do the right thing. But when Ben gets ready to destroy the tailfin, he has a calling of him and Cal like drowning on the water, and they see the tailfin and they're trying to like swim to the surface. But then for Ben, he finally pieces it together. He's like, our mission isn't to destroy the tailfin, it's to put it back, which makes sense. Because look what Zombie was able to stop that volcano eruption by I guess, destroying the... Well, I guess that's also the thing of like, she got rid of it by destroying the... Well, she didn't actually technically destroy. I guess she kind of returned it in a sense. But maybe the thought process was by doing what she did, by throwing it in the lava, like she kind of returned it, but also destroyed it simultaneously. So maybe that was kind of the justification of why they didn't immediately think to put the tailfin back. Because the marks on Cal's body start glowing, and so does Ben's hand. So it's like the tailfin was never meant to be found. The only reason why it ended up in that circumstance was because Sanvi ended up killing the Major, and that kind of set that all in motion. So like obviously like none of this was supposed to happen. It's just kind of like the wrong side of the callings and just everything kind of going wrong led to this. Maybe you can make the argument maybe this was kind of like part of the trial, like, oh, this is punishment for you tipping the scales more on the negative side, so maybe this was supposed to be like a boom, like someone is going to discover it. So I don't know, like maybe I'm reading too much of it, maybe I'm overthinking it, but obviously Vance is like, obviously he wants to help. It's like, obviously he's like, I did listen, I shut down the testing and stuff like that, because for Ben it's like, my boy, this is my son. As a father, like, would you really let your son be going through the same thing? So he shut it down. Obviously Dr. Gupta not too happy about it, but in that moment, Ben's able to kind of reach him by being like, yes, I made mistakes before. You went to Cuba with me because of the tailfin and everything, like, but our mission wasn't to bring it back. It was to take it back to where it was found, like back in the bottom of the ocean. And he's like, yeah, I sacrificed a lot. He's like, yes, and I'm sorry, and I was wrong. He's like, I've made a lot of mistakes recently, but I've never been more sure than anything of like this in a very, very long time. And for him, it's like, the fact is, I wouldn't ask you to risk anything I wouldn't risk myself. This is my boy. This is my son's life. I'd risk my life for it, you know? Which immediately my brain's like, are we going to see, like, potentially Ben die at the end of this? There's other elements that kind of correlate to that, but maybe even self-sacrifice on his part. Have to wait and see, because Vance is like, fine, I'll help you, but we're going to do it my way. At the same time, like, Michaela, even though she had a complicated situation she did with Jarrett, kind of has to ask for his help, because she, at first she went to find Bethany, which Bethany's kind of wanting to have nothing to do with all of it. It's so sad that literally everyone is turned against Ben, because it's like, oh yeah, Ben is a maniac, and it's like, yes, he's made some mistakes, but everything he's ever done over the course of this entire series, like, does that mean nothing? Ben has always tried to be in contact with the passengers. He's trying to make sure everyone was okay. That's way before we even found out about the lifeboat. Yes, he's a little crazy, but who wouldn't be a little crazy when it's like not just his life on the line? It's not just everyone's life on the line. It's his son. But that's also an argument used against him, because it's like, oh, you're just about protecting what's yours and your people, your family. That, they're kind of making it seem like that's all he cares about, which that's enough to kind of skew his decision making. It's like, he was scared to death of losing his son before, when, Cal had cancer. I think one is specifically leukemia he had. So, like, of course he's kind of in that mode again, especially because, like, we had the episode 10 where the anniversary had come around. So, of course there's going to be issues of that, but it's also like he is, whether it is just about protecting his son, he is about protecting everyone else too, because one person can sink this entire lifeboat. Like, that's knowledge that, like, it's kind of being passed around now. But Bethany also, like, she can't, she's on a no-fly list, so she can't be a flight attendant anymore, and no one else is going to hire her as an 828er because they're being, like, judged publicly and stuff like that. So, but for Michaela, it's like, someone's going to get hurt. We have to figure this out. So it turns out she heard someone else screaming, and lo and behold, who was it? Egan. The fact of the matter is, and it's him opening the door. I'm like, okay, so Egan is the bad guy again, because it's like, right. Because Bethany is like, I had this feeling like he was going to kill us all doing what he did because he opened the door. So Michaela goes to Jared. Hey, gotta see Egan. He's reluctant, like, fine, you owe me, blah, 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 blah. And talks to Egan. It's like, Egan and Adrian even being like, oh, I don't have the callings anymore, which I guess at the time should have been clear BS because, well, first and foremost, this wouldn't be the first time Adrian's ignored the callings. He did it before, like, last season, and, like, stuff went super sideways because of it. So that's what's so messed up, that it's like you are kind of ignoring the callings too. But part of me is wondering, is he only, he's interpreting it the way he wants to? Is he only seeing what he wants to, not that the callings are only showing him a certain thing, but maybe from his perspective, he's only seeing things, because obviously, like, the callings are not always clear cut. They are up to interpretation a lot of times, because I guess that's part of the trial and everything, to figure it out on your own. We can't give you all the answers. We can give you a hint, but you got to piece the clues together yourself. Hence why Michaela's doing what she's doing. But because the only one that doesn't have the callings anymore is Sanvi, because she kind of got rid of the marker. She's kind of been out amongst the passengers and stuff to a certain extent, and Zeke because he beat his death day. So those are two opposite avenues of how they don't have the callings anymore. So it should have been a sign, but because for him, he basically makes a metaphor of like, right, if you starve something out long enough, like, the voices will go away. Like, as long as you ignore them, don't listen to them. But she talked to Egan, and Egan's like, no, I wasn't trying to hurt us. I was actually trying to save lives because I saw everything. So he opened the door trying to find some of the way out. He sees a bird, a raven, and a crow, which obviously later on they talk to Olive, and the crow is supposed to represent, like, he had sent, like, I think a crow or a pigeon. I think it was like a pigeon out first, and then he sent, like, the crow afterwards. Like, I don't know whether she was referencing either the pigeon nor the crow returning. Either way, that's what that was supposed to be. But Egan also knows, like, the empty seat, so he's trying to, like, he helps Michaela know, like, exactly which ones. Granted, he's still on his anti-Ben stuff, because it's like, oh, Ben, NSA, blah, blah, blah. It's like, once again, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you got your own preconceived notion about my brother and my family. He's even suggesting, like, you and me, we should actually be the ones in charge. And maybe, it always does seem like, well, I don't know whether it's everything setting up for Cal to be the one that kind of gets in charge, because he is, like, the centerfold of this. But it makes you wonder, is that what, I mean, Michaela's kind of questioning whether or not she was supposed to quit as a cop, but it makes you wonder, like, was this actually the case? Like, maybe it's supposed to go this way because maybe her full attention is supposed to be to the passengers. As she said, like, I chose a side. I chose the passengers. So part of me is wondering, is her position to actually take over kind of leadership of, maybe this was always her path. Maybe not. Especially with, like, Zeke in her life and him being the empath. Like, maybe these are, like, them together as a team is supposed to kind of fill that void. Like, of kind of like them together is kind of like the leader. Where Egan is like, oh, it should be you and me. It's like, maybe it's supposed to be her and Zeke. I don't know. Because she's the only person that has, I mean, she stumbled in the sense that she kind of lost herself because she's not sure what her purpose is supposed to be, but I don't think she's ever lost herself the same way some of the other passengers are, as well as Ben. She's kind of maintained who, even though she's kind of questioned who she is, but she hasn't always gone too off the path like Ben has. Like, once again, like, you understand why he did it. He just kind of went a little overboard. I don't think Michaela's necessarily gotten to that point, so maybe that's supposed to showcase that she is supposed to be more leadership material than anyone else. But, where is it they went next? Right, with Michaela's, I mean, like, Olive is looking into all that, the bird and Noah's Ark and stuff like that, and so, working with, Zeke, like, obviously they go through the passenger list. It's like, okay, was it this person? No, they got transferred to a different seat based on what Ben's discovered. But then it's like, okay, who was actually the one in that chair? And ultimately they end up finding out the one actually behind it was Adrian. I'm like, that's so fascinating. I was like, whoa. So he lied about not being able to have that calling. So it's like, why was it? The question is like, why are you lying? But Olive comes in and she points out like, okay, and I think this is where we get really fascinating, where it's like, I mean, to be fair, like, what's religion? Religion's always kind of like, an interpretation of, like stuff that's passed down and kind of been interpreted to a certain extent or something. It's interesting because that's kind of what the Bible is. It's someone wrote it down. So, and obviously there's different Bibles and stuff like that, but it's interesting where they kind of take the note. Because, like, even, Michaela's like, right, I know one version of Noah Ark. He put all the animals, he knew the flood was coming, and he was trying to tell people, but they didn't listen. And Olive says that's most stuff, but there is some stuff that depicts him as not the savior of the world, but the destroyer. Because he realized, like, he was disgusted by the world. It's like, people suck, they're not worth saving. So he prayed to God to bring the flood. I was like, whoa, that's interesting. So I always think that's interesting, like, this show kind of give you a different perspective like that, because, like, on certain aspects when you watch certain things, it's like, things aren't necessarily what you think they are. Like the show Lucifer kind of gives you a very different perspective on Lucifer and just who he is as a character. So it's different, but kind of a similar thing, which I thought that was fascinating. And obviously when Michaela goes to Jarrett, it's like, no, bump that. Like, you quit. You can't have it both ways. I'm not going to, like, go up. It's like, what should matter first and foremost is we're trying to save lives, because she wants to talk to Adrian. But Adrian and the others were already released because they already got printed and stuff like that. So there's no need to hold them. But once again, it's like Jarrett's kind of being pissy towards her because he's being left out, because it's a whole thing of like, right, I've been by your side with all of this the moment I found out about the callings and everything. I helped you, and now you're keeping me on the outs. To be fair, it's also can't involve him about the Sanvi thing, because if he finds out, he's going to try and arrest Sanvi, and it's like, obviously for Michaela, it's like, that's, in her mind, that's not like the right thing to do. But Jarrett's a very, he's a stickler for the rules himself, so. But once again, I think it's just his own, like, feelings of feeling abandoned, that, like, you left me again. Like, the fact is, we're supposed to be partners, we're supposed to have each other's back, and you say, like, it hasn't been like that for a long time. It's like, his feelings for her are kind of clouded, so, like, you definitely see him kind of, like, borderlining an antagonistic role again, but I think it's with the best of intentions. But where his story goes this episode, it really sets it up like, he's going to be potentially an issue going forward, because Sarah goes through her mom's stuff. It's like, some of her mom's belongings got brought to her. And there's like, here's a medal from one of my swim mates. And then it's like, whoa, what's this about? And it's a stuff about Sanvi. And immediately Jarrett realizes what it is. And it's like some drives or whatever. It's like, and then immediately he remembers, like, he questioned her about the major and never got any answers. And it's like, now it's like, Sanvi lied to me. It's like, wait, why was my mom? My mom was investigating a lot of people. He's but why would she have stuff about Sanvi specifically? It's like, do you have anything? She has anything to do with my mom's death? He's like, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. You're like, oh boy, things are definitely gonna go sideways. Or the argument could be, maybe this is the way things. Like, I think it is a combination of free will / pre. Destined, things are set. Like, that's the thing of what's set in stone and what is free will, because some of this almost feels like there is no free will, because they're constantly being nudged in a certain direction. So it's almost like maybe this was always meant to be happening, but it does seem like there is an element of free choice, because your choices do matter. We saw that with Jace, Pete, and Corey. Jace's choices screwed Pete and Corey over as well, So just a lot of interesting things in that element. But now, once again, Michaela's wondering whether or not she really should have quit the force. But then you have Zeke grabbing her hand, and he's able to kind of, because of his empath abilities, he can't see the calling, but he can feel what she's feeling. So she's talking to Egan, but Egan's still kind of set in his ways, because I think it's supposed to represent, like, he's not willing to listen to her, because it's like, yes, maybe he legitimately is trying to save the other passengers, but it does come off being a little self-preserving, because all he's ever done is look out for himself. Like, once again, like, he's always used the callings to benefit him. It's like, if I kind of benefit off the callings too, like, who cares? It's not that big of a deal. Doesn't seem like he has the most altruistic. So, like, maybe in that moment it's supposed to represent, like, either he's so focused on his own survival he's not willing to listen, or just the fact of the matter is he's just so set in his path of what he believes that he's not willing to listen to anyone else. But in that moment, Michaela goes over to Adrian, and his eyes are bleeding like Sanvi. like obviously like Sanvi was lying about everything, and eventually like when she told the truth about the major and everything, that's when she recovered. So Adrian's lying about something, just not sure what. But then like you have Zeke being able to feel his feelings. Is like, I felt it. It was like shame or guilt over something, and it's like the fact is he did something, I guess, and he's kind of lying, and that's why he didn't want to listen to the callings anymore. Maybe he listened to the callings and that led him down a dark path, and that's why he's trying not to listen to them anymore. Maybe it's about the fire, because he seemed like he redeemed himself over that when he helped save a life, but we haven't seen him since then. Last season, that was the last time we saw him. Like, once again, he saw like the shadows of like the Jace, Corey, and Pete. But that was like the last time we saw him in season 2. So we don't know what else he's actually been up to in that time frame. But it's like, it's also the thought of like, well, what if it's not that he's going to, or maybe it's that, or maybe it's his eyes were bleeding because of what he's planning on doing. He's lying, saying like, oh, we're doing this for the greater good, but in actuality, maybe he has ulterior motives. I don't know. The fact is, he's planning to go after Ben. He's rallying up the others. Well, Egan kind of helped with that, because for them, it's like, there's already this registry kind of potentially down the road of like, they're going to fingerprint us, they're going to out us. It's like, and we're going to be on some registry of like, oh, you're 828ers, stuff like that. It's like, it's already going to go down that route. So he rallies up other passengers. It's like, Ben Stone, blah, blah, blah. He's just going to protect his family. And then you have Adrian. Maybe because, I'm like, the fact is, he's a very like, religious person. Like, I think that's so fascinating that he went down that route of like, doesn't follow the, because even Egan was like, well, I thought Noah was a savior, and he's like, is he? And so it's like he knows about Noah being the destroyer. So it also makes you wonder, is this almost like a manifest destiny, like almost like he's putting it out there and kind of manifesting this all himself, putting Ben as the destroyer, when in actuality he plays that role? Maybe that, I don't know. Obviously a lot of these answers probably end up coming up in episode 13, but for now I'm like, I'm not quite sure which way they're kind of going with that. But obviously he's about spilling blood, and you're like, oh, it's like, we need to kill Ben to kind of save ourselves because he's the harbinger of the apocalypse. But it's like, in actuality, it's you, which is like, the fact is you're passing it on to Ben. Maybe it's like he doesn't want to really confront the mistakes he's made, even though Ben's in the process of confronting what he's done and trying to make up for it. So there's all of that. Back at Eureka, they're trying to get Cal to a regular hospital as they try to deal with this tailfin thing. But Dr. Gupta's like, oh no, I went over your head, and like your higher up decided, nah, they want me to continue my work. And obviously Grace goes off on her. It's like, don't sit here and claim like you were trying to help my son and the other passengers. Like, you don't care. The fact is, all you care about your research, because it's like, once again, it's a conversation. This is something divine. This is something we shouldn't be meddling with. Like, this is beyond our, but it's like Dr. Gupta, and you can make the argument Vance is kind of in that vein as well, but for him, it's like, yeah, like now that Cal's kind of gotten injured to the point, like, this is getting bad, like, Ben's words kind of were able to reach him. He's always kind of been on the passenger side. I think he just, and despite everything he's kind of done, he's still been on their side, because it's like, by discovering this mystery, yes, like, I can, get something out of it, but also like, I help you guys in the long run. But Dr. Gupta, it's like, she's a scientist first and foremost. Sanvi has the benefit of being a scientist and an 828er, and now her eyes are kind of open to like, right, we're probably doing more harm than good with what we're doing. So, but Dr. Gupta doesn't have that perspective, and that's something Cal's trying to get across, like, and that's something like, Michaela brought up to Jared, like, they will never understand like the calling and this feeling, like, because to them it's just kind of like a yeah whatever, oh, you got this, cool, whatever, but they'll never truly understand like this feeling of like this purpose, this drive, and being pushed in a certain direction. And Cal's like, I'm gonna make them see, and he's like, I love you, Mom, and he dashes towards the tailfin and he touches it and teleports away, and it's like, wait, where did he go? What happened? So that's where the episode ends there. So a lot of interesting things. Like I said, I'm going to go watch episode 13 now and do my review. Like I said, I'm going to try and release these like maybe like 15, 30 minutes apart, so they're just at least there, or maybe even an hour apart. Who knows? It depends on just how I want to do it. I'll make a last minute decision or whatever about it. But yeah, You should also like check the end card because it will be there at some point throughout the day, you know, when I upload this. But I'm really, really interested to see where it takes us with, you know, continuing the finale. But obviously this isn't the season finale. But like, I'm curious to see where all of this ends up taking us and how it ultimately all ends up playing out. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.